Several of the visitors to our studio gardens this year have named the cottage garden as one of their favorites. And that's not really surprising because cottage gardens are kind of making a comeback. They're really beginning to gain in popularity again, especially in the southern states. Now the concept or the idea of a cottage garden comes from gardens in the past where the homeowner would have a small home or a cottage on a small piece of property, and they wanted to grow a lot of plants, but they didn't really have the room. So what they ended up doing was turning their whole property into a series of beds and pathways and virtually eliminated the turf or lawn areas. Then they would take all these plants that they wanted to grow and they would just kind of pack them together. They would kind of take one of these, one of that, just kind of stick them in the beds. So you get this look of a lot of plants really crammed together, kind of intermingled with each other, plants growing through each other, and sort of things spilling out from the edge of the beds into the pathway. Well, we've tried to create that same look here in our garden. We've used lots of different plants. We've used lots of different forms or shapes of plants, kind of like the round or bushy form of the pentas here. And then we couple that with a lot of flowers that have kind of spiky inflorescences, like the Russian sage here. And a lot of the salvias work well for this spiky type of bloom also. Well, we've used lots of annuals, lots of perennials, and even a few grasses. A nice rose that we have in our cottage garden is the Marie Daly rose, and it has fairly small flowers, but there are a lot of them. The plant is quite fragrant, and it's also very, very resistant to the black spot fungus. A good plant to create that effect of spilling into the pathway is this little Mexican bush zinnia. And sometimes these will reseed from year to year, and we just leave the ones that kind of come up on the edge of the pathway. It really helps create that cottage garden look. Right back here is a perennial that we grow for the foliage color, and that's the Powys Castle Artemisia. And it really works well to tie all these colors together. Well, our cottage garden here is unique in that we have a lot of structures such as arches and trellises to grow a lot of vines. So it's sort of a cottage vine garden. And I'd like to just tell you about a few of the vines we have in this garden. And I'll start with this one right here. This is the double blue Picotee Morning Glory. And this is a fairly new plant. It's new to our garden this year. And a lot of the flowers on the plants have a double effect. And of course, any plant that has the word Picotee in the name refers to a different color around the rim of the petals. And with a little bit more warmer weather later in the day here, you'll begin to see a little bit of a white line around the edge of the petals. Shows up nicely in the warm days, especially in the mornings. Now this morning glory is, I think, a little bit tougher than some of the other morning glories we grow. The leaves are crinkly and a little bit tough, a little more rigid than the soft, furry leaves of most morning glories. But we grew this from seed, from Seymour Selected Seeds out of Virginia. And it's really been asked about a lot in our garden this year. And on the other side of the arbor here is a wonderful hybrid passion vine. We have several other interesting vines on our large arbor that we've constructed here at the studio gardens. And here at the entrance, we have two very interesting vines. This one is the Mexican flame vine, and it is interesting because it's a climbing daisy. There are not a lot of plants in the daisy family that are vines. So we're really lucky to have this one in our garden. And another interesting thing about this plant is that it seems that the monarch butterflies coming through this fall have really enjoyed it. On the other side of the arbor, we have a vine that we talked about last year on our program. And this is the winged beauty, also called bow tie vine. This plant is in the euphorbia family, like our Christmas poinsettias. And similar to the poinsettias we get at Christmas time, the bulk of the color comes from these bracts instead of the flower. These are modified leaves that really add some showiness to the flower. Now, an interesting thing about this plant is that the nectar from the flowers is very, very sticky. It's almost like glue. And you can see here that this poor unfortunate little ant ended up stuck in the nectar. So, just an interesting little bit of information for the bow tie vine. Well, as we move on down the arbor, we have a vine right here that supplies a lot of color, and it has showy flowers, but you get a lot of color from this plant from these wonderful golden green variegated leaves. This is the variegated potato vine, and it's called potato vine because it's in the same family as potatoes. It doesn't really produce any potatoes. But if you remember what the flowers on your potato plants looked like back in the springtime, you'll know that they were similar to this. Little white petals and yellow stamens. This plant did overwinter for us last year, but that was due in part to the winter being very, very mild. Well, right over here we have another passion flower. This is Jeanette passion flower from Logie's greenhouse out of Connecticut. And it's one that's not really vigorous, but it produces an abundance of flowers throughout the year. Right up here we have a blue pea vine, and it's called blue pea vine because it is in the pea family or the legume family. And this one actually has double flowers. This is a plant that is very easy to grow from seed, and it'll flower for you the first year. In India, they actually make a dye out of the flowers of this plant. But very showy blue pea vine. Well, in the back of our cottage vine garden, we have some plants that are sort of in the same family. A couple plants that are related, kind of like brother and sister, and then I'll show you a plant that is actually one of their cousins. And the group of plants that I'm speaking about here are the Thunbergias. This is the black-eyed Susan vine, and this is the traditional black-eyed Susan vine flower that you would think of, with the kind of pale orange outer petals with a dark center, and kind of intermingled back over here with another one of our bow tie vines is the white form of this plant. So it's a white black-eyed Susan plant. The botanical name of this vine, or actually both vines, is Thunbergia alata, and in Latin, alata means wings, and you can see it gets its name from the wings on the petiole. The petiole is the stem of the leaf. You can see these two wings right here. Well, if we consider these two brother and sister, they have a tropical cousin, and that is Thunbergia grandiflora, and that is our blue sky vine, and it's one of the favorite vines we grow here at our gardens. It's kind of got a little bit of cold damage because we've been having some cold nights, but during the summer we get these large blue flowers, and it's just a bigger, more robust plant than the little black-eyed Susan vine. You can see the leaves are large and waxy and a lot more rigid. Well, if you decide to put a cottage garden in at your house, remember, you can't really go wrong. Just kind of pack the plants together, and if things don't look right, you can move them around for the next year. And don't forget to put a few vines in your garden as well.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.